Okay, we got a few things to talk about. 0.2.0 is the next major update coming for Path of Exile 2. They're starting to put some teasers out, including 2 new unique items that they have posted are coming to the game with that update. They also mentioned in a previous post about some of the more major points that they are trying to focus on as some of the biggest problems for Path of Exile 2 right now. There is a free cosmetic you can earn in Path of Exile 2. Actually, I'm eligible for it. You can watch my live stream today. I'll be live as of the posting of this video, and you'll get a free cloak in Path of Exile 2 if you watch for a number of hours and link your account on the Twitch down below. All that and more, let's go ahead and dig into what I expect to come in the next major update. Okay, first things first, they showed 2 new unique items on Twitter. Last night, they just put these out there. And the first one's kind of interesting. First of all, this sort of looks like the Gladiator helmet, if you've seen the artwork for the Gladiator in the game. And if you look at this, armor and evasion. Okay, so it is a hybrid base. Now, it has increased armor evasion, accuracy rating, life regen, can't use chest armor, which is a absolutely enormous negative, and the reason it has that is it has a pretty good benefit of you can wield 2-handed axes, maces, and swords in one hand. And it looks a little bit like the Gladiator helmet from the Gladiator Ascendancy from PoE 1, which is not in Path of Exile 2 yet, and he doesn't wear a chest plate in that Ascendancy either, or at least not visually on, the image of the Ascendancy. Now, one of the things they stated is not only are 6 new classes still coming to the game with 6 new, weapon types, but also there are 6 new ascendancies coming for the classes we already have. There's supposed to be 3 total ascendancies for every class, 12 total classes, 36 total ascendancies. So that means Warrior, Ranger, Sorceress, Monk, all of the original classes still have another ascendancy coming, and this could be tied to the Gladiator. So maybe it's a tease that a Gladiator ascendancy is coming to the Warrior, perhaps, or maybe it's part of the Duelist, or maybe it's not a tease at all and it's just a helmet. Now, the next one's kind of interesting. We have a higher physical damage unique mace with only a level 65 requirement. So this isn't too bad of a mace just in terms of a physical damage output here. You can see it's 325, 488 before quality or sockets, but then it has 10% reduced attack speed. Okay, so again, we're kind of doing the reduced attack speed on something that's already slow, but it has some cool other passives. 10% to all LE res is all right. 50% increased mana regen is okay. But then you have gain a random shrine buff every 10 seconds is actually pretty cool, especially if, buff duration will increase this buff length, and then it doesn't account for the fact that it's every 10. Maybe you can get over 10 seconds so you can start stacking these. This one's actually kind of interesting. And maybe if you pair this with the helmet where you can wear multiple of these things, then you're basically getting 20 all res and you're getting 20% admittedly reduced attack speed. But then you're also getting 2 random shrine buffs, maybe that pop up every 10 seconds. So kind of interesting uniques. Now, if I go full Warrior Copium, what does this mean to me? Mesa, they're teasing new Warrior Ascendancy, the Gladiator, the Duelist, and they're also teasing Mace rework, but, probably not. Because we're going into, once 0.2 comes out, over 3 months into the game, I would expect to see something major coming out with this update. We'll be looking at something like, a new class at a minimum. You have to keep in mind, we're 3.5 months, 6 to 12 month release date, 6 new classes. That means we need basically a new class every 2 months. So we would want like 1.5 classes effectively, or some new ascendancies for the base classes that we have, plus a new class, a new weapon type, to stick to sort of that 1-year timeline that was originally stated. Now, that's just on the content side of things. I actually have a whole list of things I would really love to see. I posted this a while back on Twitter. These are some of the things I would love to see in some of the next major updates. I think additional crafting systems. I put this right at the top. I think this is one of the things that Path of Exile 2 actually really needs. I understand there was this concept of we want loot that you are actually using to be acquired basically on the floor, that you can get a drop that can be really good and doesn't require you to learn, 50 different systems about the game. However, you go back and you play Path of Exile 1, even Diablo 4, both of these games have, significantly better crafting systems. Like basically any other game, Last Epoch, has some sort of crafting system, And in Path of Exile 2, it's basically just gambling. I mean, you're just going to Chaos Orb something. I mean, let me put it this way. How many times has this happened to you? You get a really good item that dropped on the floor. Maybe it's 4 affixes, maybe 5 affixes. 3 of those affixes are pretty good. 1 or 2 of them have a chance to be Chaos Orb. So you're like 1 out of 3, and if you exalt it, maybe you got a bad stat, so now you're 3 and 3. You know, 3 of them, it's a coin flip, basically, that you could hit something and make the item effectively better. And you could say, well, DM, well, how about omens? You could go out there and you could get one of the omens that makes it where it forces on the suffix or a prefix. So let's just say that all of the suffixes are bad and all the prefixes are easy, just to make, or perfect, just to make the conversation easier, okay? Those omens are not only massively expensive and quite rare, but they basically don't exist in the game. And then that, let's not even forget, if you're talking about early game in Path of Exile 2, it's not worth it to invest into an item like that. Like if you get an item at level 50 that's quite good in the manner I'm talking about, there's no reason to invest a late game amount of currency. In fact, you probably don't even have remotely that much currency to get 1 omen to gamble on an item that's probably worth 1 exalt in the open market literally anyway. And you would have to use the currency exchanger, which is a non-SSF mode. If you're playing SSF, well, you can't craft literally anyway until you can find the omens, which again is a late game thing. So crafting basically doesn't exist in SSF, or doesn't exist in even trade unless you're in ultra late game and happen to be rich. And at that point, you can spend the same currency basically just straight up buying an item that's better anyway. So in its current state, no matter what form you are of playing the game, it's not that good. But let's go back to the item example. So you have perfect prefix, horrible suffix. Omens aren't really being used for the reason I've stated. And you have a coin flip. You flip the coin flip, it hits, you know, the 50-50 on the wrong side of the coin, and now you have basically a completely worthless item. Does this sound like something that sounds fairly familiar to you? And breaking items should exist, but you should have methods of honing down and making an item better. And that can come through one of these other additions, such as new in-game mechanics, or basically league mechanics that can arrive in some of these games. I'm sure we're going to get an economy reset, probably some sort of pseudo-league in 0.2 would be my guess, as they want to bring players back into the game, and that probably will require an economy reset at this point, and very often they implement league mechanics with that sort of thing, and some new crafting systems could come within that. They've also mentioned they want to update things like the current league mechanics to make them better, so greater essences could be improved. The omen issue I'm mentioning could be, be more frequent, or maybe there's a way to target farm those through rituals. So they don't necessarily have to implement new league mechanics to make the system better. They could just juice up and hone down and improve the quality of life of some of the systems that are already implemented into the game, and this would also improve the crafting within the game. Now, one of the things they've been doing that I hope they continue to do is adding quality of life, like being able to see the citadels outside here was a very nice quality of life added in the game. And if you didn't know, up here, there's a map legend. This has been in since the start of the game. You can click here and it'll show you what these actually break down as. One additional quality of life I would love to see is the ability to click right here and type. Like if I want to type in any of these legends, they've had this nicely here. I could type in, okay, well, what about unique map? And I type in them right there. And then it would be like a Control F search where I can basically click through all of the different iterations I have on the map, and it would go to those nodes. Or I could maybe even click and highlight, like highlight map boss, highlight irradiated, highlighted breach. So I want map bosses that are irradiated with breach in them, and then it will highlight those ones and again let me cycle through them. It's small additional quality of lives like this. I love that they're continuing to do these types of things, and I hope they continue to do it because quality of life is something that's desperately needed in an ARPG, as anytime you run into irritating things, they can be quitting moments if you continually have that irritating moment over and over and over again. So I think they've done a pretty good job at improving the quality of life generically, and I hope they continue to do this. And of course, meta rebalancing. How many times have you seen builds that include Herald of Ice and Herald of Thunder? That's like half the builds right now because it's the way of automatically screen clearing. So I am assuming that in 0.2, we're going to see a significant rebalancing of the meta. Now, I thought about this, and I think that 0.2 is going to be very interesting because it's going to tell us one of two things. It's going to tell us either they want the game to be like Herald of Ice, Herald of Thunder, in which you're very strong, you scale up, you're popping the maps, or they want it to be closer towards the beginning of mapping where it's a little bit slower and you're not just immediately one-popping everything. If they nerf down Herald of Ice, like the Stat Stack or Spark builds. These builds are really kind of destroying literally everything, and they tune it down to be significantly slower across the board from a ceiling of power perspective. Then we know, okay, well, they are, they wanting the game to be a lot slower in the end game effectively. They don't like this power level of players. Something else they might do is they might raise the floor of the power up and give people more options that are similar to this style of Herald of Ice, Lightning, Spark, etc. There might be with new skill gem additions, because again, we got 6 new classes, 6 new applications of skill gems with new weapons, etc. We're going to see a lot of new tech introduced into the game, and we could actually see a lot of new tech similar to the Herald of Ice added that could add the variety in it. I've thought about this, and often I wonder, I think it's 2 things. I think one, people don't like seeing the screen clear immediately with just one tap, and that's fair enough feedback. But I think another portion of it is it's really the lack of variety that annoys a lot of people when it comes to things like Herald of Ice and seeing Spark for the millionth time. It's because there's only a certain number of builds that currently do this screen clearing, and when you're doing hundreds of maps in a row, you're going to want to screen clear very quickly. Why would you purposely run a build, unless you're Karn, I guess, that's slower on the screen? You're playing Warrior all the way to level 100 or something like that. You're just going to run a class that's faster because you're farming some currency or materials or what have you. So they might add new additions to actually bring the floor of the power level up. But the 0.2 will be pretty important because we'll kind of get a look into the mentality of the new skill gems that they're bringing to the game. Are they going to make maces faster? Or are they going to add more weapons that are similar to maces? Are they going to nerf Herald of Ice to be much less of, the power level as it is? Or are they going to bring up some of the other Herald, maybe Herald of Ash or, et cetera? Are they going to bring up some of the power level of some of the other abilities? So 0.2 is going to be kind of laying the cat out of the bag in terms of how they're feeling about the in-game balance, because we haven't had a major rebalancing yet. To give credit on Path of Exile 2, after playing Path of Exile 1, I've got to tell you, I very much more so enjoy the current socket system in Path of Exile 2. Having to go back into PoE 1 currently on the event and redo links, redo the color of it, and then you get an upgrade and you can't wear it because it doesn't have the sockets. I've learned to enjoy this socket and skill system drastically over the previous iteration. That is one of those scenarios where less does feel like more for me. It's technically less crafting, but that was a portion of crafting I actually hope does not come back into the game, as it always felt more like a chore and a hindrance from being able to make new pieces of gear or use new pieces of gear that you acquire, as opposed to helping me along the way. But we can probably safely assume in 0.2, we're going to see the 4 major points addressed that they say are currently on their mind, as these are the biggest problems. I'm actually curious to see that crafting isn't really on there, but it could be into in-game progressions, what they mean. So basically, they mentioned the major balance issues with many player skills. We talked about that. Not enough build options, or including build-defining uniques. We talked about that. In-game progression balance is off. This is actually one that in PoE 1, they do this pretty well. So what happens is when you get to maps, you know how when you get to maps and Doriani says, like, do this tier of maps, then do this tier of maps, and you go through the progression of tiers of maps. Well, in PoE 1, they do it where if you hit like tier 5 of maps, for instance, or tier 10 of maps, like as you're progressing through them, then you have these little like breakpoint fights in which he's going to give you, like, here's a boss to go fight, okay? And you get a reward associated with the boss, etc. So I think that would be a good way to do it. You hit tier 10, they give you a boss fight. Hey, go fight this, instead of you just having to farm Breach until you get Zesh or farm all the Citadels, you get Arbiter, etc. There's other fights that you have along the way. Something that when someone asks you where you are on your maps, you can say, oh, I just fought the tier 10 boss or something like that. Like these breakpoints along the way, I think would be something quite interesting. And then this is kind of a generic one where they say not enough cool things to find in in-game. And I think that pretty much boils down to mechanics. Like, while you're in your map itself, you need to be able to find cool mechanics to do. Or, you know what I really enjoy is when you are on the map, suddenly you run into these unique maps. Like, how many of you guys have ever actually even seen the vaults? And some of the Citadels, right around the Citadels, there are vaults. I think it's the Stone Citadel. I forget which one. It could be the Iron. I think it's the Stone Citadel. Here you go. You can find these vaults here. And if you actually enter these vaults, in fact, I'll just show you real quick. It's effectively just a treasure trove unique map in which you go around here and you can just acquire whatever happens to be within the map. So you can just open up here, you get, it's just a loot. It's just basically a giant loot box is what the map is. And this is a unique map that only shows up around the Citadel. So that was pretty cool. In fact, there's some maps that I've played the game, just about 700 hours now. And there's a map called C Notes I've only ever actually seen once. And that's just a type of map. It's not even anything special. So being able to run into things you haven't seen before, I think would go a long way in the Atlas mapping. So we'll see what comes with 0.2.0. These are just some of my speculations, predictions as we are kind of twiddling our thumbs waiting around for the update. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. It'll be live now. If you want to get your free Twitch cosmetics, you just have to watch the channel for a few hours. The link will be down below. Link your Twitch account with your Path of Exile account on the Path of Exile website, and then it'll show up in Path of Exile 2 and you have a free cosmetic. That's about it. See you on the live stream.